Ready to explore the latest trends in real estate? What are innovators in building planning for the future? The Ralph Bivens Project digs deep into the minds of key players in the industry and discussions with today's thought leaders. I'm Ralph Bivens. As a journalist who's covered the real estate development industry for decades, I invite you to join me as we probe for new ideas and projects that will be making headlines soon. We love to ask hard questions to interesting people. When you've done over 100,000 interviews, you seem to get enlightening answers. Don't forget to download and review this podcast on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your audio inspiration. You can also watch and subscribe on YouTube or visit realtynewsreport.com. Welcome, this is Ralph Bivens and the Ralph Bivens Project. We're here today with Patrick Jankowski. He's chief economist of the Greater Houston Partnership, and he's covered the area's economy, this regional economy, in great detail for a number of years. And so we're glad to have you here, Patrick.
Ralph, thanks for having me on. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share some insights with your listeners.
Well, you've, I guess, right, this is the big overall question. There seems to be so much uncertainty out there with all these different pressures and changes and, threats and unknowns. And so what do you say how would you describe the state of the Houston area economy right now, Patrick?
Okay, Houston is actually doing quite well, except it's at a point of transition. We've just come off 2 years of absolutely incredible growth for the city or for the region. Last year, we created 145,000 jobs. In 2021, we created 172,000 jobs. Those are the two best years on record for job growth in Houston. We've never seen growth that strong. Granted, some of it was coming out of the pandemic and the recovery, but just everything was aligned for absolutely incredible growth. Now, so a little bit of a transition.
Huge, 144.
Yeah. But we can't sustain that pace forever. And so we are seeing a bit of a slowdown, but we're seeing a slowdown to a more normal level. If you look at the last 12 months, so we've got a little bit of 2022, a little bit of 2023 in that 12-month total, we're at about 124,000 jobs. So we are seeing the slowing down, but we're not in danger of going into recession. We're not in danger of having a collapse. If you look at it, most sectors of Houston's economy, with the exception of one or two, have created jobs over the last 12 months. It's been nice to see. Oil and gas has created about 4,500 jobs. Manufacturing's created over 8,000. You're seeing in the wholesale business, retail, transportation, finance. They're all creating jobs. The only sectors that aren't creating jobs in the economy right now is construction. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. And that leisure and hospitality sector. And that's what has the restaurants, the bars, the arts, the gyms, and so forth. That one throws me a little bit. It may be that maybe they're misreporting it, but it may be I'm concerned that maybe the heat has kept people at home this summer. And people aren't going out the way they used to. I know my wife and I would rather stay home than walk across a parking lot that's 92 degrees, even at 8 o'clock at night. Yeah. But overall, we're doing fine. We really shouldn't be worried. I mean, yeah, you should be concerned, but you shouldn't be worried. You shouldn't be losing sleep over the state of the economy.
I guess the oil prices have gone up pretty significantly, in the last couple of weeks. Last time I looked, like $87 a barrel or more, and that's a lot more than it had been. It had been stuck in a lot less, and I think we're seeing that at the pumps already. And if you haven't, it's going to be showing up there soon. But of course, we've been called energy capital. Houston's been called energy capital of the world since forever. I know where the economy is more diversified than it was 40 years ago, but still, it has an impact. What about these rising oil prices? What is that going to do for the South Texas area here?
Well, that's a challenge for us in the sense that in Houston and South Texas, Southeast Texas, we want oil prices to be high enough to stimulate some of Houston's economy, but we don't want them to be so high that they weigh on the rest of the U.S. economy, because we are part of the U.S. economy. It's nice to see the rise. I went and looked at the data before you and I came online, and this time last year, oil prices are selling for much less. We've seen, actually since June, we've seen oil prices go up about $20 a barrel. Mm. And you're right, it is showing up at the pumps. But we need that because we've seen the rig count slowly decline since November of last year. Mm-hmm. And we've got to get the rig count back up because that supports manufacturing jobs. It's going to support demand for industrial and warehouse space and injects more money into the economy. And so maybe we might start to see a little bit of a turnaround of the rig count. Last time I looked, we had only lost one rig in the week, but we had multiple weeks where we lost 8, 9, 10 rigs. So oil prices, they don't provide the lift they used to do for Houston's economy, but they do help somewhat. You talked about, if I can just digress a little bit, what has happened with the oil and gas in Houston and the oil and gas employment. If you go back to December 2014, it was the all-time high for oil and gas employment in Houston. 300,000 jobs. Wow. And that's exploration production, oil field services, equipment manufacturing, engineering. We lost a third of those during the fracking busts of 15 and 16. And we haven't recovered very many. We've only recovered about 20,000, 25,000. So we're right now about 80,000 jobs short of where we were at the high point.
Wow. Is the amount of activity a lot smaller, or are they being able to do more work with less, more efficient use of the manpower?
You nailed it right there. It is there. We are able to produce more crude with fewer people, which tells me we're never going to get back to 300,000 jobs. Mm-hmm. We're found a way back when we were at peak employment. In the end of 2014, the U.S. is producing about 8.8 million barrels of crude a day. So shave 80,000 jobs out of that for Houston. And right now we're producing about 12.8 million barrels a day. So we've almost increased our production by 50%, but we're doing it with a fourth fewer workers. Mm-hmm. We understand the geology better. We understand the techniques better. And the thing about that is, Scott, energy is such a great, have so much demand used to have demand for office space and industrial space. Yeah. And so we're going to have to look for demand to come somewhere else. It's not going to come from the oil and gas industry or from engineering.
Yeah, I guess that leads me, as somebody that concentrates on all aspects of real estate with, realtynewsreport.com and our newsletter and things. You think about that shrinkage of the workforce, and you look around and office vacancy is pretty high, 25% vacant, more or less. That's pretty high. And you wonder, how are we ever going to fill all these buildings?
I'm afraid to say we're not going to fill them. I think we're going to have a significant number of buildings that never get leased. Mm-hmm. The low rise, some of the stuff that's 80s legacy built in the suburbs, I'm wondering why we have not seen more of those properties scraped. In my neighborhood, there's been one that's been scraped. It was a three-story low rise that just scraped it, brought it down to the foundation. I suspect we're going to see more of that. I'm skeptical of people who talk about converting an office building into apartments. For one reason, the infrastructure is not there, the plumbing and the wiring and so forth. Everyone's going to want an outside window. People like to have balconies. You can't retrofit balconies. And the other thing is, we talk about commercial. Right now, apartments are being overbuilt, horribly overbuilt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like 20,000 units under construction, or
exactly. We have 20,000 units under construction, and kind of by their nature, what's under construction is a Class A property. Over the last 12 months, we've only absorbed about 4,500 apartments. And that's all classes A, B, and C. If you look at Class A, we've absorbed maybe 11, 12,000. So we're still building twice of what we absorbed in what was a boom year for job growth. Yeah, and so, it's a sort of thing where if you're a landlord, it's not good news, but if you're a renter, it is.
It gets some rent relief. I mean, that's a good thing. I do believe, that we've got a lot of demand for rental housing right now, and with the mortgage rates keep going up. I think the latest I heard from the Freddie Mac Weekly came out yesterday. It was like 7.19% for a 30-year mortgage. That's a heck of a lot more expensive than it was, higher than it was, a year ago. And it's like 5 or 6% or something like that. So way up, it's getting higher. And some people I know, Lawrence Young, the chief economist for National Association of Realtors, said, "Hey, we could be at 8% by the end of 2023," which that's a big number, and it's going to be hard for the market to swallow it.
Yeah, that's the best hope for the apartment market, is that interest rates go up so people can afford to buy houses. I know it sounds horrible. So they have to remain renters by choice. I mean, renters by necessity. I mean, before we talked, I got on and I did just a little bit of math. And if you look at a $400,000 home in Houston, and then back in 21, when interest rates were below 3% versus where they are now, that same $400,000 home, that monthly note is $1,000 more per month than it was just 3 years ago.
Wow. That's tough. That's so tough. I remember talking to, the guy, a friend of mine at the National Mortgage Bankers Association. And the numbers, well, every time it goes up 1/8 of a point, this is a couple of years ago, but you go the mortgages go up 1/8 of a point, it knocks out like 3 million people from being able to buy a house, being able to afford the median or even a starter home. So it keeps going up. Fewer people can buy a house, and so they turn to the rental market, which I think that may, if that comes to pass, it may bail out a lot of these apartment guys that may be getting out over their skis. So, I don't know, but maybe not. Maybe they. What do you think about rates, Patrick? We've had these humongous raises in the last year. The Federal Reserve trying to fight inflation and get prepared to knock that down and slow down activity. But these big 3/4 of 75 basis points, 3/4 of a point, I guess, maybe easy way to say it, but those are big rate increases. Do you what do you think? Are there any more in the pipeline for this year, or what do you think?
I really suspect that we're going to see at least one more raise, maybe only 25 basis points. We may see 2 more raises. The issue is we don't really have inflation under control. It may feel like we have inflation under control. If you look at June of last year, inflation was around 9%. If you look at July this year, inflation's around 3.3%. But that's kind of the headline inflation. And the Fed is more concerned about core inflation. And that's when you take out energy and you take out food. And if you want to say, why do they take out energy and food? Well, it's because they tend to be very volatile. So looking for things which show ingrained inflation, show what the real trend is, and not what we're seeing fluctuating because of weather or because of supply disruptions. The core inflation rate is still about 4.6, 4.7%. The Fed would like to see that get down to around 2. So what I think that's going to happen is they're going to pause and wait for another 1 or 2 inflation readings to see if we're still going down, and if not, then they're going to go back to raising them. But they're not going to be raising them 75 basis points. They'll be raising them 25 basis points.
Well, gradually, yeah.
Yeah, because that's probably one of the biggest threats to the economy right now. Is it's not being able to get inflation under control, and the Fed having to continue to raise interest rates to try to bring it down, because if you have high inflation, no one can plan for expenditures. You don't know what to pay your employees. It affects purchasing power. It affects hiring decisions. It affects investment decisions. We want to see inflation at a nice steady rate and feel confident that it's going to be at that rate going forward, and then you can plan around it. But when it's so volatile, I mean, it's classic. Business doesn't like volatility. Business doesn't like uncertainty. And so the Fed's got to do something to get inflation under control and to stop raising interest rates. But I still suspect we're going to see at least 1, if not 2 more rate increases this year, and those will be small increases.
Well, it's anything they do is going to, probably impact the mortgage rate and what people for the home buyer and for people that are investors of commercial property. That has a big impact on them also.
Well, one thing we're lucky in Houston is that the housing market is less regulated than in other metros.
Mhm.
And so the developers are pretty good and pretty savvy at trying to be as flexible as possible to deliver a house at a price point that the local community can afford. They may simplify floor plans. They may develop further out. They'll buy down points. That's the classic not having the restrictions on development that you see in other areas. So housing is still affordable in Houston, not as affordable as it used to be, but you have a lot better chance of buying a home in Houston than you would in some place on the West Coast or in even parts of the Midwest.
Yeah, that's and I know, Houston is. You look at the numbers on, national numbers on building permits. Always Houston and Dallas, the top two in the nation. 40, 50,000 starts or something, and in the third place is like way down there. But so our two main Texas cities are the leaders in the home building thing, and we've. I think that does help, and it does help affordability to have more options. I mean, I don't know. They've always heard the old phrase, drive till you qualify.
Yes.
Go, let's go. And we've expanded. Oh yeah, Willis. Oh, Willis North is now there's new home construction big time in Willis, which is 50 miles, I guess, north of downtown. It's we keep spreading and spreading, and developers get more affordable land, and I guess it's okay, and to some point, because it does seem like there's more activity, commercial office activity and employment activity happening in the farther reaches of the suburbs. We're seeing a lot more of that, like the Chevron, buying 77 acres recently. That's in Bridgeland, which pretty far out there. Grand Parkway at 290, basically on the northwest side. That's pretty far out. But
Ralph, you talk about it being far out. But one thing that's changed,
Yeah.
you and I have studied this market for a couple of decades now. When I started my career, if I wanted a good paying white collar job, I had to drive into downtown every day for it. And I had to work in one of the tall office towers. And I had to wear a 3-piece suit and carry a briefcase. That's changed. You do not have to drive into downtown. I think it's classic. Think of the energy corridor. Think of Clear Lake. Think of the Woodlands. Think of all the campuses which are getting set up. So it may be in Willis, but you don't have to drive from Willis into downtown to have a good paying job. And so that's
Springwood Village, or the city place rather, where the Exxon headquarters, world headquarters of Exxon is. Not that far from Willis. It's a lot closer in downtown.
It's great. I'm glad that Exxon is finally here in the Houston region. I always wondered why they were up in Irving, Texas. But in the last few years, we've picked up 3. We've picked up HP, we've picked up Intertrain, we've picked up Exxon, moving their corporate headquarters here. And I'm hoping we'll see more of that as companies just realize the benefits of doing business in Houston, how they can pay their employees a reasonable wage, and the employees can afford a nice lifestyle and afford a nice house.
Yeah, and these are not junky, communities in Willis. We're talking about Howard Hughes has a nice development. The Woodlands Hills, it's they know how to do master plan communities. They don't, cut corners and do junky stuff. They do quality stuff that with the lifestyle that people like and everything. I may have rushed through a little bit on some of the stuff about, and we know that we talked a little bit on commercial about, we've got there's the problem of the office space. I do think there's room to do a certain amount of conversions. There is room to do conversions to residential from office. if you got the right kind of building with, the right size floor plate, and and I think that we got some bright minds design wise that may be able to come up with a solution, and we may be able to have some type of incentive, like we did with the downtown living initiative. Okay, build a project, and we'll cut you a tax break on some of this stuff. So if you're going to take this chance, we may be able to get some of that redeveloped into good places to live. It seems a shame to spend all that energy to tear down new buildings or tear down old buildings. Tear down buildings, that's a lot of expenditure and a lot of, it's not
Well, I agree with you. If the city's going to do this, though, they're going to need to offer some incentives, because there's significant risk there, and it would help if they would help to mitigate some of that risk by offering some sort of taxes.
Have you? I know you have, but but what do you think about? We've been building a heck of a lot of warehouses, man. This has got to be one of the major warehouse construction zones in the world right here. Seems like you have a feel if this is are we getting overbuilt on that?
Not quite, but I am a little concerned. Over the last 12 months, we've delivered about 31 million square feet of industrial warehouse space. We've only absorbed 21 million.
That looks like 10 million to spare.
10 million to spare. And so we'll see the vacancy rate go up from below 5%, 5.1, 5.2 to about 6.9. It's a little bit of a concern there, but I think we're starting to see some backing off on construction. A lot of the stuff which took place was financed with cheap money. So you're not going to see the same amount of level of construction, so we'll be able to absorb it. So if we don't continue to build at the rate we are, I think we'll be okay. But if we continue to add 30 million square feet of industrial space a year, we will be overbuilt. But I think the market's beginning to read the signals and pull back on that. So I once again, the difference between being worried and being concerned, and maybe I'm a little concerned, but I'm not worried.
Hey, Patrick, you know how to handle stuff too. You're not a worrywart. I've known you long enough. You can flow with the punches here, man. When it's a economy's darkest days, you don't panic. So I've seen you give speeches when it's pretty grim before large audiences, and you look at it with a realistic viewpoint, but you don't transfer panic into the people in the seats there.
Well, Ralph, part of the thing is I've been through 6 recessions.
6 recessions.
I've been through 6 recessions, so I kind of know how they end. They end at some point, and every recession we've gone through, we've always come out of. And a few months down the road, we're back to growing again. So it's kind of like coming down with the flu, or breaking your leg or something. Maybe that's a little harsh, but it's like an illness that you get over, and when you get over, you feel better and you go about your business. And that's the thing. Maybe it's too harsh a metaphor, but I said a recession's not like a cancer diagnosis. It's more like a flu. It's a recession. It's not a chronic condition you're going to have to live with. It's just something you need to take care of and heal. And so that's why no one should ever really panic. They should be concerned. Here I go once again: panic, concern, worry. Just things always, at least in Houston, they always tend to work out. Now, that's one of the great things about being an economist in Houston, is that I've seen so many cycles that I know how they're all going to end. They're going to end with Houston coming out and with the growth resuming again.
Hey, let's look a little bit farther out. 2024. What's going to happen here in next year?
Part of it's going to depend upon what happens with the U.S. Once again, growth is slowing down, but growth is slowing down to a more normal pace, or I should say a more sustainable pace. I wouldn't be surprised if next year we come in somewhere around 70,000, 80,000 jobs. Now, that's not my official forecast. I've got to run the numbers.
No.
But we're going to hit back to a more normal. We're not going to lose jobs. Emphatically, there is not going to be a recession next year in Houston or the U.S. We're not going to lose jobs in Houston or the U.S. We are going to have slower growth, but we're having slower growth after having finished a sprint that we've had the last 2.5 years. I can see the current pace of office construction, which is about 2 million square feet a year, maybe less. I can see industrial space ratcheting back from 31 million to somewhere around 20 or less. I can see retail continuing at its normal pace of 4 or 5 million square feet, or maybe 2 or 3 million square feet a year. We'll see somewhere north of 30,000 single-family home starts. Part of it is if the financing was in place, but after that, it's going to be. I'm probably more concerned about the end of 2024 than I am about the beginning of 2024.
Why is that?
Because we still have a lot of momentum, and that momentum is going to carry us into the first part of the year. And the end of 2024, the big unknown, and it's not something that you can put a number on, but starting in July next year, people are going to say, I need to wait and see who the next administration is going to be in Washington. Mm-hmm. I need to see and figure out what their tax policies are going to be, what are their trade policies are going to be. And you'll have the business community postponing decisions or waiting on making decisions because they don't know whether it's going to be an R or a D in the White House. And so they're simply going to be waiting. And that's why the second half of the year becomes a little bit more uncertain because of the political uncertainty.
It does seem to be quite uncertain. I don't know. I guess, but this year it just seems a lot more. Right now, it seems a lot more uncertain than I can ever remember it being. Just these big question marks, and who knows? I don't blame people that are getting ready to invest $1 billion somewhere to pause and see. Hey, let's see how it goes out.
Oh yeah, that's businesses can anticipate and plan for and deal with risk. They do it all the time. That's what the insurance companies do.
Yeah, well,
it's the uncertainty that you cannot develop a model for, or maybe you can, but it's so hard to plan for the uncertainty. But you can plan for risk.
Yeah, you can't. And I'm, I don't know, but if we do get pinged, I think the Federal Reserve. I've read. I'm not an economist, but I've read that when they do these 75 basis point increase, it takes. You're not going to see the results actually rubber hitting the road for maybe even 18 months later. And so it just kind of struck me as they were a little bit slow to pull the trigger in the first place, and when they started pulling that, they went hard and fast, and we haven't had time to really digest all the impact of those big hikes. And so that would lead me to believe, the last part of 2024, not only are people going to be pausing because of political concerns, but you've got those impacts of those big increases we had. We don't know when they're going to fully be played out. And if they come in with a couple more, 25 basis point pings in 23, that's cause of concern.
Yeah, the expression that the Fed has used, or past chairman of the Fed used, is monetary policy is a long and variable lag. And I think that's it. We have not seen the full impact of interest rates, especially on things like some capital goods purchases, or just take, for instance, automobiles. People are delaying purchasing an automobile because the interest rates were so high. Mm-hmm. At some point, they're not going to be able to delay purchasing it. They're going to have to replace that car,
right?
And that's going to hit them. The same thing with other capital expenditures, which have been deferred, hoping that interest rates will drop, or the Fed will start easing off. So I still think it probably won't be for another year that we fully understand. And this is something I am looking into, fully understand the impact the higher interest rates have had.
Yeah, it'll be interesting watching it. But I'm glad you're a believer that there won't be won't be a recession, and we'll all get through it one way or another. We always have. So
Yeah, for there to be a recession, there has to be something huge happen. Like the last one was happened because of COVID.
yeah.
And before that, it was the subprime mortgage crisis.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of out there watching, trying to figure out what's going on. The banks are tightening lending standards, but I don't think they've over tightened them just yet. Oil prices are going to go up, but they're not going to hit $150 a barrel. The Chinese economy worries me a little bit because they've been a major source of demand for a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I don't see any one of those things. Maybe let's just say death by 1,000 cuts. Maybe there might be a whole bunch of little things, but right now I don't see any major thing that would really throw the economy off.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the deal about not some of the people working in China not going to be using Apple phones anymore. That came up recently. I think it caused a dip in Apple stock immediately. So you think stuff like that's kind of scary, and we were so. I think in the last few years we've become more and more aware about how closely tied that our economy is, and overlapping with what's going on over there, and where it's if they trip and fall on some economic point, it may not be that great for some companies, for some American companies.
China's the second largest economy in the world, so if they slow down, they will affect the rest of the world.
Patrick, thanks so much. We've Patrick Jankowski, Chief Economist of the Greater Houston Partnership. I'm sure he'll be giving some major presentation pretty soon in this fall, and his annual outlook for the years coming up. I know lots and lots of people attend those events, so we'll be talking to you before then, I hope. All right, Patrick. Hey, thank you. We'll see you soon.
See you soon, Ralph. Thanks.